darkness, my old friend. I've come to talk with you again.
Frankly, this series could have run to 10 parts. I've cut it down to 3 to avoid losing the will to live. I also want to avoid restating information that's been presented in other videos, so I'll just link them to you here. You've probably seen them before.
Natural selection works by selecting those traits, in this case numbers, that are advantageous, fit to survive, and rejecting those that aren't.
So gene duplication is step 1. The second part that has to happen is that a mutation has to occur in that duplicated segment to grant a new function.
Those scientists established.
I should also point out that this isn't NephilimFree's voice, as you can probably tell, but he did write this junk.
Those scientists established that random mutations are incapable of producing information. Let us imagine for a moment that the evolutionists claim that random mutation has created the information of the human genome were true. Geneticists at the University of Sussex and Edinburgh have determined that approximately 100 mutations become fixed in the human gene pool per generation.
Well, they didn't, did they? They said 100 mutations are added per generation. And this isn't just pedantry. As I'll show in a minute, it's the word fixed that is the dangerous detail here.
Because evolutionists claim random mutation is the designer of virtually all of the genome.
No! Mutation is just the method. Natural selection is the designer. How many times does it need to be said?
Let's provide the best possible condition to support their claim by assuming that not only do these 100 mutations per generation become part of the gene pool, that they become fixed in the genome and therefore become part of the wild-type form by natural selection.
So the argument goes something like this. A mutation occurs in a genome thanks to radiation or whatever it might be, and then that base pair is somehow magically protected against all further mutation. This, of course, is completely unrealistic, and as we'll see in a moment, has severe consequences on the maths.
We will also give the evolutionists the benefit by assuming all these mutations are random.
That's not a benefit, that's just a statement of fact.
And not examples of programmed mutation, which is a natural, intelligent design process of the DNA support system.
I'd like to discuss so-called programmed mutation on another occasion, but suffice it for now to say that the evidence in support of it is sketchy at best.
Let's also assume that all are beneficial, since evolutionists claim that random mutations are beneficial.
Oh, give over.
And we'll go one step further to provide the best possible opportunity for the evolutionists' beloved random mutation.
Beloved?
By assuming that the rate at which mutations become part of the gene pool in other life forms at the same rate over time as for man.
Well, there's another dodgy assumption.
Since a human generation is considered to be approximately 50 years.
And another.
We therefore assume that these 100 mutations per 50 years are all random, all are fixed in the genome, and all are somehow beneficial.
At this point I got slightly carried away and started doing something that I haven't done for years. Maths. For those of you who don't want to listen to this part, here's some music. What NephilimFree has done is calculated the number of mutations, m, in a given generation, as being the time elapsed in years, t, divided by the length of a generation, l, and then multiplied by the number of mutations per generation, c. To put it another way, the number of mutations in a generation n is equal to the number of mutations from the previous generation plus the new number of mutations. And the result?
Let's look at how many random mutations would accrue in the genome over the time span that evolutionists believe life has evolved. Let's apply the geologic column to this rate of accruing mutations. By the beginning of the Cambrian, there would be an astonishing approximate 100 million mutations fixed in the genomes of life forms.
That should actually say 200 million, but I'm willing to accept that that's a simple copying error.
By the Devonian, there would be 500 million accrued mutations in the genomes of all life forms. By the Permian, there would be 700 million. By the Triassic, there would be 800 million. By the Jurassic, 900 million. By the Cretaceous, 1 billion accrued mutations. By the Mid-Cretaceous, 1.1 billion. By the Tertiary, 1.2 billion. And by the time man appeared in the Quaternary, 1.28 billion. And by the modern era, 1.3 billion random mutations would have accrued in the genome of life forms including man.
As I said, these figures are based on the assumption that mutations can't override existing ones. Here's a rather crude calculation which takes that into account, although it only models for single nucleotide polymorphisms. I ran it on my computer for 13 million generations, and here's what I got. As you can see, the further we go, the more my figures deviate from Neph's, and what we end up with is an average. The number of mutations in individuals within the population would follow this kind of distribution. It is possible, albeit unlikely, that some individuals may only have 100 if those 100 mutations fall in the same place in each generation. Alright, you can look again now. As for that 50-year generation time, that's bonkers! After all, how many couples do you know who have children when they're 50 years old? And it's equally daft to assume that there would have been 100 mutations per generation in all our ancestors. Mutations occur as a certain proportion of all the bases. Those ancestors with better error checking systems would have had fewer mutations, as would those with smaller genomes. And finally, why the timescale of only 650 million years? Simple. Because the geologic column that NephilimFree found on Google Images only goes back that far, and he didn't know any better. The date of the origin of life is believed to be closer to 3.3 billion, so how accurate is the estimate overall? Well, frankly, I haven't got a clue. The point I'm making is that modelling mutations is a horrendously complicated business, so plugging 3 numbers into an equation was never going to come anywhere close. But anyway, lots of mutations, blah blah blah. What's the point you're trying to make?
Thought scenarios preposterous, as such a crude random mutation would cause the extinction of all life on Earth.
Hang on a minute. Let's go back a bit, shall we?
Let's also assume that all are beneficial, since evolutionists claim that random mutations are beneficial. Thought scenarios preposterous, as such a crude random mutation would cause the extinction of all life on Earth.
So all these beneficial changes somehow add up to being lethal? I know that 2 wrongs don't make a right, but it seems that 2 rights can make a wrong.
Geneticist Harry Brett-Nielsen has admitted that his 40 years of experimentation with mutation failed to produce any morphological change in any organism.
I'm not sure why this is being illustrated with fruit flies, seeing as Nielsen was a botanist, but in any case, this is the testament of just one scientist, and a creationist scientist at that, and they're hardly fabled for their honesty.
Such experimentation has been conducted for 70 years and is conducted daily around the world. All have failed to cause the slightest morphological change to any species. If mutation were capable of causing morphological transition of one kind of life into another, we should have at least one documented example from the millions of mutation experiments that mutation has caused a permanent change to the morphology of a species, and not merely the deformity of the individual organism. One must remember that color, size, pattern, and even shape are not morphological.
You might want to take that one up with Wikipedia, Neff, because they don't seem to agree with you. When I went to Conservapedia, I discovered that I might as well have asked a brick wall. I think what you mean is anatomy, i.e. how the body parts are laid out in an organism. These dogs are the same anatomically, but morphologically they're extremely different. And even then, anatomical mutations are well documented, be it an extra pair of legs, wherever that might be, an extra pair of wings, a 21-leaf clover, changes to flower structure, changes to maize branching, the list goes on. No doubt Neff will try and discount this as being a deformity of the individual organism. In that case, the definition is so close that there's no way that a mutation could cause anatomical change. But if there's one thing that struck me when I was making this video, it's probably the nerve of a man who is more than keen to dismiss radiometric dating on the basis of dodgy assumptions, whilst making many dodgier himself. Then again, he also made this statement which is very out of character for a creationist.
It is a fact that that which is immaterial cannot create that which is material.